Hola, chicas. I'm leaving you this video to go along with the story of Little Red Riding Hood that you see on the screen right now, in hopes that you've already completed this. You should be watching this video after you complete this assignment. If you watch it beforehand, there won't be much of a point to it, so make sure that you've completed this first. If you haven't, stop, pause, go back and do this, and then come back and watch this video. So after you've completed this, the next thing that you're going to do is take a look at this video. And in this video, I'm going to explain to you in a little more detail some of the reasons why we chose the preterite or we chose the imperfect in some of these situations. I'm going to do a little bit of this in Spanish, but I'm also going to do a little bit of this in English for you, especially as I know this is your first real kind of longer story that you've read and had to make these types of decisions in. I want to make sure it's really clear for you. As always, if there's questions or problems before, during, or after you're watching this video, please, please, please ask me those questions through one of the avenues that I've set up for you. Okay. So, all of that being said, you finished your story. So now let's take a look a little bit at the story of Caperucita Roja. So, I have this separated in sections, so you will see different pieces of the story on the different slides, and we'll kind of go through them step by step. You can be looking at yours as well as you go. So, the first part of the story, it says, ser una niña que llamarse Caperucita Roja y que vivir en el bosque con su mamá. Aquí tenemos tres verbos, ser, llamarse y vivir. Y estos verbos tienen, bueno, un trabajo muy importante en el cuento, porque estos tres verbos sirven como una descripción del escenario del cuento. Entonces, todos estos verbos están en el imperfecto. Entonces, era una niña que se llamaba Caperucita Roja y que vivía en el bosque. I'm going to rephrase this one in English. So these three verbs are all in the imperfect because they all do the same job. And their job in this story is to describe. So we're saying there was a girl who was named Little Red Riding Hood. So we're describing what her name was, and who lived in the forest with her mother. It's a description of where she lived. You can also notice that here with the verb vivir, there's no time frame associated with her living in the forest. It doesn't say she lived there last year or that she lived there for a certain amount of time. We just know that she lived there for an undefined period of time sometime in the past. So all three of these are going to serve as our background for the beginning of our story. Okay? Vamos a continuar a la próxima parte del cuento. Un día, su mamá decirle que tener que ir a casa de su abuelita porque estar enferma y llevarle una cesta de comida. Caperucita preparar todo y irse andando por el bosque. Tenemos muchos verbos aquí. Entonces, vamos a empezar con esta parte del cuento. Un día es una expresión muy importante porque un día es una expresión que usa el pretérito. Ahora sabemos que esta acción ocurrió aquí, un día. Entonces, un día su mamá le dijo en el pretérito. Ahora vamos al verbo tener. Tener es un verbo difícil en este contexto. Tener sirve como una descripción de lo que la mamá dijo. ¿Ok? Entonces, tener sirve aquí como descripción de lo que la mamá le dijo a su hija. Entonces, un día su mamá le dijo que tenía que ir a casa de su abuelita porque estar enferma. Estar enferma es una descripción, ¿no? Es una descripción de cómo era la abuela, o en este contexto, cómo estaba la abuela. Entonces, es una descripción de la abuela. Estaba enferma. Bueno, y llevarle una cesta de comida. Chicas, una cesta de comida es esta cosa aquí. Es una cesta de comida. Caperucita, preparar todo y irse andando por el bosque. Preparar es el próximo evento en el cuento. Entonces, es una narración, es una acción completada. Entonces, Caperucita preparó todo y después, ahora tenemos acciones consecutivas, se fue andando por el bosque. Estos dos verbos están en el pretérito. Okay, quick pause and switch back to English here. So, this part of the story has two sentences, and you'll notice that each sentence has a little bit of a combination of both the preterite and the imperfect. Well, these two sentences together, I should say. So, if you look at the first sentence, un día should be a big clue to you. If you see this expression, girls, it should be a pretty giant hint that the preterite is going to be the best option. So one day defines the time period where this action took place. We know when it happened now. So one day her mother said, le dijo, and it's also good to remember the preterite is used to narrate your story. It moves it forward, whereas the imperfect is going to be more of the description. So one day her mom told her is the next action in my story that moves it forward. That can help you as well. So one day her mother told her that she had to go to grandma's house, a la casa de su abuelita. So let's take a look at this tenía here. Tenía is in the imperfect because it is doing the job of describing. What is it describing? It's describing what her mother said. Okay, so a little bit of a curveball there. That's a little bit of a harder one to figure out. One day she said that she had to go. It's literally describing like what mom said, what words came out of her mouth. Okay. Moving forward down here, casa de su abuelita porque estaba enferma. This is because we are talking about grandma's physical condition. We are describing her. She was ill. Okay? And Caperucita is going to bring her a basket of food, like you see here in the picture. Caperucita, we've got preparó todo y se fue andando por el bosque. We've got two preterite verbs here. And the reason why both of these are in the preterite is because both of them are going to serve as consecutive actions. If you remember that from last week, a consecutive action is one action right after another. One thing happens and is finished, and then another action occurs and is finished. These two actions both move our story forward. Little Red Riding Hood prepared everything, and then after she prepared everything, she left, walking through the forest. So we know that those are the next two events that help to continue our story and get us towards the end. Bueno, continuamos con la próxima parte en español. De repente, encontrarse con el lobo que preguntarle a dónde ir. La niña responderle que ir a casa de su abuelita. Entonces, en esta parte del cuento hay muchas palabras importantes. Primera cosa, de repente. De repente es una palabra, o sea, una expresión importante. De repente generalmente significa que aquí tenemos que usar el pretérito. Entonces, de repente, se encontró con el lobo. Es la próxima acción en el cuento también. Entonces, se encontró con el lobo. Chicas, es el lobo aquí, el lobo. Entonces, se encontró con el lobo que preguntarle. Entonces, el lobo le preguntó a Caperucita y eso está en el pretérito porque es la próxima acción en la serie, son consecutivas. ¿A dónde ir? Ir es, bueno, no es difícil, pero tenemos que pensar mucho sobre el verbo ir aquí. Este verbo es mejor en el imperfecto. Y es mejor en el imperfecto con la forma iba, porque Caperucita en este momento no está en la casa de la abuela. Todavía está caminando para llegar. Entonces, la acción de ir a la casa de su abuela no está terminada en este momento. Bueno, la niña responderle que ir a casa de su abuelita. Bueno, la respuesta de Caperucita es la próxima acción en la narración. Entonces, le respondió, porque es pretérito, es la próxima narración, que iba, y iba funciona como este iba aquí, porque la acción todavía está en progreso. Iba a la casa de su abuelita. Okay, pause, and we'll go in English here. So we've got 5 verbs here, are going to use a pretty good combination of both the preterite and the imperfect. And I like that they're together in this way because it really does help you to see a little bit of the difference between what the preterite will do for you in a story versus what the imperfect will do for you in a story. So it says de repente. This word is, again, it's kind of like un dia in the previous slide, really important because de repente, if you remember, means suddenly. Suddenly will clue us in, if we're reading something, that an action has happened and that it's completed. So suddenly she se encontró con el lobo. So she met the wolf. Okay. Who asked her. Now you see how this happens first, and then what's the next action in my series? This one right here. So these are a series of consecutive actions. She met the wolf who asked her, ¿A dónde iba? Imperfect works better for ear here, and I love that it's used in contrast with these two here. Iba is in the imperfect, not because it's consecutive, because let's think about that for a moment. Suddenly she met the wolf, and then he asked her where she, if this was in the preterite, it would mean where she went. It would then mean that that action was already finished. And I want you to think for a moment. Has Little Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's house yet? No, she's on her way. She's in the middle of the forest. She's carrying the basket. She's going to grandma's house. So the action of going to grandma's is still in progress. Okay. And I know the other day last week, you learned how the imperfect is used specifically for those actions that have not yet finished or that we don't have a defined time frame for. So this is still happening. She's still on her way. La niña le respondió. Here's my preterite because this is the next action in the sequence. Helps to move my story forward. Okay. So she responded, le respondió, que iba, there's that iba one more time, a casa de su abuelita. Why are we using iba again here? Because again, Little Red Riding Hood has not arrived at grandma's house yet. She's on her way. It's in progress. Okay. I hope this is making sense so far. Remember, drop into questions or help if you have problems. Vamos a continuar en español. Entonces, el lobo correr para llegar antes a la casa de la abuelita y comérsela. Luego, disfrazarse con sus ropas y meterse en la cama. Entonces, aquí tenemos 4 verbos que están, bueno, que tenemos que navegar. Vamos a decidir pretérito imperfecto. Entonces es otra palabra importante. Entonces significa que ahora tenemos un evento. Vamos a tener una acción completada. Entonces el lobo corrió para llegar antes a la casa de la abuelita. Esta es la próxima acción en la narración. Y después de correr a la casa de la abuelita, se la comió. Uf, pobre abuelita. Es comida para el lobo ahora. Luego, disfrazarse. Disfrazarse, chicas, significa poner la ropa de otra persona. Entonces, en la foto aquí, el lobo se está disfrazando como la abuela. Tiene su vestido y tiene es un sombrero, cosas así. Entonces, luego es otra palabra importante. Significa, tiene el mismo significado como entonces. Entonces, luego se disfrazó en el pretérito con sus ropas y se metió en la cama. 4 verbos que están en el pretérito. We have 4 preterite verbs here because we have 4 actions that are consecutive. And if you think about the whole context of your story, these are 4 actions that are going to move it forward. One happens right after the other. Entonces is a huge clue word here. Entonces lets us know that the preterite is coming up because we know then this happened. It defines the time frame where it occurred. So then the wolf ran. So that's my next action in my story. He ran in order to arrive to grandma's house first before Caperucita. And se la comió. He ate her. Oof. Luego works a lot like entonces, meaning that it's going to cue in the next action in a sequence. Luego se disfrazó, and I mentioned before that disfrazarse means to dress up as. So you can see in the picture here that the wolf is dressing up as grandma. Entonces se disfrazó, he then dressed up like her with her clothing. Y se metió en la cama. Meterse means to get into. So he put himself in grandma's bed. So do you see how these four actions happen one after another? First, he ran in order to get to her house. Then he ate her. Then he dressed up like her. And finally, he put himself in her bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. 4 consecutive actions. 4 actions that move our story forward. Bueno, para continuar aquí en español. Cuando Caperucita llegar, encontrar a su abuela muy extraña y decirle, uy, abuelita, qué ojos tan grandes tienes. A lo que el lobo responderle, es para verte mejor. Oh boy. Entonces, vamos a empezar por aquí. Cuando Caperucita llegar. Este verbo es importante porque es la próxima acción en la serie. Entonces, si regresamos aquí un momento, el lobo se metió en la cama, está en la cama, y la próxima acción que ocurre es Caperucita llegó a la casa. Y cuando ella llegó, ella encontró, es la próxima narración, a su abuela muy extraña. Extraña significa como diferente, loco un poco. Y decirle es la próxima acción en la narración. Le dijo, uy, abuelita, qué ojos tan grandes tienes. A lo que el lobo le respondió, es la próxima acción en la serie, es para verte mejor. Bueno, let's talk about this in English here. Again, we have 4 verbs that all ended up in the preterite. Oops, my screen shifted. 4 verbs that ended up in the preterite. Why did that happen? Because we have another 4 actions that happen in sequence. We're at the part of the story where we're starting to get away from the description and more into the action, right? If it's all description all the time, we'll never find out what happens. So it says, when Caperucita arrived, and in my previous Spanish explanation, I flipped back to the screen previous because our last thing where we left off was the wolf put himself in grandma's bed. If we go here, the next thing that happens is that Little Red Riding Hood arrives at grandma's house. So when she arrived, she found just one time, and it's the next action in the series, her grandmother looking a little bit strange. I think it's fairly obvious that grandma might be a little bit strange because grandma, I would hope, is a human, and now grandma's a wolf. But so she finds grandma a little bit different than normal. And she said, le dijo, this is the next action. See one, then the next one happened, and then here's the next thing. She says, uy. Uy is one of those words in Spanish that is like, oh, like it's like an oh or an ay, ay, ay. So, uy, grandma, que ojos tan grandes tienes. We all know this as the famous line, what big eyes you have. You can see those big kind of creepy eyes over here. A lo que el lobo le respondió, to which the wolf responded. See how she asked this question, and then the next action in sequence is he responded. Es para verte mejor. Again, that other kind of famous line everybody knows. All the better to see you with. Okay? Vamos a continuar. La niña volver a preguntar, ¿por qué tienes la nariz tan grande? Es para olerte mejor, replicar el lobo. Por último, Caperucita decirle, ¿y qué boca tan grande tienes? El lobo decir, es para comerte mejor. Ñam, 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 y comérsela. Entonces, eso es el final de la historia. Vamos a ver lo que pasa. La niña volver a preguntar. Entonces, volver es la próxima acción en la narración. La niña volvió a preguntar, ¿por qué tienes la nariz tan grande? Es para olerte mejor, replicó el lobo. Entonces, primera acción, y la próxima acción son consecutivas. Por último, y esta expresión es importante, chicas, por último, Caperucita le dijo, es la próxima acción en la serie, ¿y qué boca tan grande tienes? El lobo dijo, bueno, le dijo, otra acción en la serie, es para, es para comerte mejor. Ñam, 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 y se la comió una vez. Bueno, we have another set of 5 verbs that end up in the preterite here. Again, like I mentioned on the previous slide, we're really getting into the part of the story where we're getting to the events. We're getting to all the things that happen so that way we see how the story ends. So we have a lot of consecutive actions, just like we did in the previous part of the story. So Little Red Riding Hood asked, or we kind of came back at him to ask, why do you have such a, or what big nose you have? To which he says, it's better to smell you. This is smell. To smell you with, he replied. So you can see how here's the first thing that happens, and here's the second thing. So they're consecutive. Por último means finally. This helps to define our time frame. So it's kind of like some extra support for the preterite here. Red Riding Hood said one time, again, this is the next action moving forward in my story. Y qué boca tan grande tienes? What a big mouth you have. The wolf said, le dijo, es para comerte mejor. It is better to eat you with. Poor Red Riding Hood. Nyam, nyam, nyam. This is we call this kind of like it's kind of like an onomatopoeia, I guess, if you're familiar with that from your English classes. This is the sound that the wolf would make while eating. It's kind of like saying nom, nom, nom or yum, yum, yum. But in Spanish, we have that little tilde. So it's nyam, nyam, nyam. Y se la comió. And he ate her up. And yes, my dears, that is actually where the story ends in this particular version. So there's no woodsman that's going to come and save Little Red Riding Hood. Both her and Grandma are toast. So that's how our story ends. But you can see that all 5 of these actions here happen one after another in a consecutive order. Okay, so that takes you to the end of your story. And hopefully, like I said, you read or you practiced with the activity first before you got into this video, because otherwise, you wouldn't have tried them on your own first. So I hope you did this in the right order. You may very well, after this explanation, still have some questions or some things that need to be clarified. As I mentioned previously, and will continue to mention, please don't be afraid to ask questions in the discussion board that's on my HB, or to pop into my office hours and ask those questions. I am still, although it is from afar, very much here for you, and know that this is a fairly challenging topic. And there's a good chance that many of you will have questions or concerns or things that don't quite make perfect sense. Please let me help you with those if you find that you're in that situation. Okay. I hope this went well for you. I hope that this made sense to you. And like I said, as always, I'm here to help. And hopefully, I will hear from some of you soon. Adios.